Awesome. Hi, Dawn. Thank you for joining me.
Hi, good to be here.
Awesome. So, guys, I just want to really welcome you all again today. I love doing the Facebook Lives. I love meeting new people and I love chatting to you all. So, we are here today to talk about functional assessment in canine fitness and what should you really be looking for. Dawn and I were just saying before we started that the internet has just exploded with people doing these awesome canine exercises and conditioning programs at home with their dogs, and I absolutely love that. So let's go a little bit deeper from our side as rehabilitation professionals into how we're going to use functional assessment in canine fitness. I think it's a really exciting topic. So Dawn is with us. She is affiliated with Vol and one of her lecturers, but I'm going to let her introduce herself properly so that I don't get any of those connections wrong. But I have some very exciting announcements to make. And I'm going to share that news with you guys at the end of today's live. So please stay tuned because I cannot wait to share it with you. Okay, so welcome, guys. If you're joining us live, please let us know where you're from. We'd love to know who you are, where you are, and your interest in today's topic. We're here to chat with you. So ask any questions that you have, join the conversation, and share your experiences. Awesome. Dawn, will you please introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about who you are and your interest in today's topic.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm really glad to be here and be able to share something that I'm so passionate about. And I have been working with canines. I went to school later when my kids were in high school to be a vet tech, and I've been a rehab certified technician since 2012. So I've done worked with lots of different dogs, and 10 of the years that I've been doing it has been at UT Vet School in the small animal rehab department. So I've seen a lot of stuff. But I also help with our CCRP, our Certified Canine Rehab Practitioner program. I teach in that and lecture in that. And as well, I am the program director for the fitness trainer program. So we have courses and labs all over the country, all over the globe at this point. Now we're global with the CCRP and the CERP and the CCFT. So lots of options. But yeah, I'm a VTS in rehab, specialty technician in rehab, and have my pain practitioner certification also.
I love that. Thank you. I love that you came into the profession a little bit later when your kids were in high school. I think it's so amazing that we have such varied and different backgrounds in this profession, that we've come from so many different places and we're all working for the good of the dogs that are in front of us. I think that's very special. And I think that it brings so many different perspectives into our industry that is incredibly valuable. So I love that. Thank you. All right, we have a lot of people that have joined us in the last minute. So welcome, guys. Let us know where you're from. Hi, I'm Deanna. It's so good to have you here with us from Indiana. So Deanna is a CCFT, and Dawn was one of your instructors. That's so cool. You just recently finished the rehab certification. Good job. That's awesome. Okay, so if you guys are joining us live, ask your questions during the conversation. We're here to chat with you. Thank you. Okay, so we're talking about functional assessment in canine fitness. So what exactly is meant by a functional assessment, and how is it different from a traditional orthopedic or even a postural evaluation?
Well, functional assessments are used in humans typically to screen if they are applying for a very physical job. And our dogs are very physical, so it's very helpful to know what to look for in the movements that they have in everyday living. Basically, it's watching them do activities of everyday living, like sitting down, standing up, going upstairs, getting into a car, getting out of a car, going downstairs, the things that they do on a normal everyday basis. And then for other dogs that are maybe a little bit further advanced, sporting dogs or working dogs will do stuff that actually they will be required to do in their job or in their sport. So, for example, we would evaluate them based on what they're doing. If we're evaluating a police dog, and if it's a patrol dog that's going to be used for bite work, you're going to assess them differently than you would a dog that's being used for detection. So the bite work dogs do really explosive movements that tend to strain their hamstrings. So we might include a play bow in that assessment to see how well they can bow down and stretch back into those hamstrings and if they have any limitations there. Um, when they go up and down stairs, do they take it one foot at a time, or do they double step going up or going down, which can indicate going up, obviously, a hind limb issue, going down, a forelimb issue, because of the extra weight that's put on them during that time. We might use equipment to get them to put their feet on it or stand on it, different things like that, that would show us if they're scared of the equipment, if they've ever been on equipment before. Are they unable to do what we're asking them to do because it's something, their weakness, they just don't know the behavior, or they've had an injury? There are so many things we have to look at to make sure that we're not saying, hey, this dog has a problem, when it's really they just didn't understand. Some dogs don't have a stand command. And so when you ask them to stand, they look at you like you're crazy because they just sat and you're supposed to give them a treat when they sit. So transitions from sit to stand, is it hard for them to get settled? Do they take a long time to lay down and get settled? Or is it really easy for them to sit down, lay down? Is it hard for them to get up? Is it hard for them to get up because their shoulders hurt? Or is it hard for them to get up because their hind limbs are weak? Just lots of different things that we can figure out without having to put our hands on the dog by having them do specific activities.
Okay, so the functional assessment is then really referring to that job specific or sport specific evaluation of their movement.
Or even daily living assessment for regular pets. Yeah.
So do you have kind of set outcome measures that you're looking at for specific sports? So I'm thinking of, we have the Finnish Canine Stifle Index that was published not so long ago. So are there, do you have similar kind of things that you're looking for in agility dogs? You're looking at these specific movements, or in patrol dogs, like you said, you're going to be looking at these specific movements or activities? Or do you base that assessment on the individual that's in front of you and the job that they're describing? So every time you do one, it's a little bit different and it's based on the individual in front of you. Is that how you're doing it at the moment?
That's how I do everything. Obviously, there are things that you want to look at, like hind limb strength, core strength, forelimb strength, different things, but it's going to, because every dog is so different and because they do such different things, I'm going to ask them to do it differently, because one dog's, like I said, may not understand the behavior I'm asking. So I'll have to figure out a different way to do it, which is what makes me enjoy it so much, is because it's very creative and I have to think on my feet. And I have to know a lot about dog behavior, like when they're telling me absolutely not, or yes, I want to do more. So then as you create the rehab plan or the fitness plan, that's when you're going to start thinking about what specifically to do exercise wise based on the functional assessment. And the cool thing about it is that there's been studies, a lot in military and working dogs, because that's the easiest group to assess, but showing that functional assessments, like up to a third of dogs have been diagnosed or we've seen some kind of compensation through a functional evaluation that we did not see on an exam, a physical exam. Because when you're doing a physical exam on some of these dogs, especially, they're scared, they're stressed, their adrenaline kicks in, so their fight or flight response, they don't show any pain. Everybody knows that when an owner brings a dog that's been limping to a vet clinic, they're not limping anymore. So they just make it really hard for us to see. And when we're laying them down on their side to do an evaluation, they're really guarded. So a functional evaluation gives you a lot more information.
I really like that. And they feel more comfortable, right? Because they're moving their bodies. They feel safer. And that makes me really think of that behavioral component that's becoming more and more of a focus in the equine industry, is recognizing conflict behaviors or pain behaviors is that something that you're looking at in the dogs as well in these functional exercises? So, you know, you're evaluating the actual movement, but are you also evaluating the behavior of the dog?
Yeah. Basically to see what we need to teach them, because we believe in teaching, certain behaviors like a stand cue or targeting your front feet and targeting back feet cues to help make the exercises so much easier to do with proper form. If they know that behavior, it's much, much easier to work with them. And so when you're doing the evaluation, you're trying to lure them into certain behaviors, or they may already know the behavior. So it's really important to talk to your owners and find out what their cues are, what the dog responds to, and use that as you go. So behavior is a huge component of it. Are they stressed by putting their feet up on something? Then we're going to start really flat and not do anything that's going to stress the dog. So you have to really be watching them and know their tells, know what dogs do when they don't want to do something. So
I like that. Okay, so what are the specific things that you're looking for when you're evaluating them?
Basically, can they stand properly? Can they stand without their legs camped up under them, or causing their flexion in their spine, which might indicate hind limb issues or a hip flexor issue. When they're standing, do you see more of a paw pad on one foot than you do the other, which would indicate that they're offloading a little bit? They're so good at hiding it. Our eyes can see lameness, I think, when it's like up to 20% difference in the limbs, and it's just really hard to see, especially, like I said, when they're at the vet, which is where we typically see them, or at our clinic. And so being able to watch them do activities just helps a lot more. I kind of got lost of where I was going on that.
Like, what are the specific things that you're trying to identify or see? Are you
yeah. Sorry. So like being able to see more of a paw pad than the other. Can they, if you're doing a cookie stretch, can they twist as far to the left as they can to the right? Is it harder? And again, that's a case of, do they know that behavior? You may have to block one side of them to get them to turn their head, or they just keep turning in circles. If we can't get them to sit correctly, sometimes we see dogs that have sloppy sits. So we can put them on a platform, like a board, or like a piece of lumber, or a board, or aerobic step is typically what we use. So that's just slightly off the ground, and they don't want to get their foot off of it. And most of the time, if a dog is physically capable of doing a proper sit, that will tell us. Because if they still flop off to the side, again, you're going to assess how much they know the behavior. Do they know sit? Are they freaked out by being on something this far off the floor? But if they can sit, then we know that it's usually behavior related and they've gotten sloppy, or they're lazy, or if they can't, it might be weakness, it might be an injury, typically some kind of knee injury. So that's some of the things that I use. I use a land treadmill a lot to be able to watch them consistently, because when you're trotting them back and forth and side to side, it's kind of hard to tell. Turning them in circles, watching them, and at the end of when they're doing a trot away from you and coming back as they turn, if one limb is more painful than the other in the front especially, they may dip their head down depending on which leg they're on, whether it's the sound leg or the lame leg. So there are definitely things that they will do that they can't hide, whether it's weaves or circles or different things like that.
Okay. Carrie has joined us. Hi, Carrie Lynn. It's so good to have you. She says she's a CCRP in Charleston, and Dawn was one of my instructors. You're the best, Dawn. Thanks for doing this. Yeah, it's so good to meet you and to have you here with us, Dawn. Thank you. Okay, so what you mentioned, using a treadmill. Do you use any other tools like slow motion video, or
all the time? All the time. Yeah, slow motion video is crucial. It's also really, really good to remember to do it because I use a lot of videos in my presentations. So
Really?
that gives me a lot of library of stuff. But sometimes they're going so fast, especially at a trot, you can't always see everything. You can't see the circumduction of the limb or something that's going so quickly. So we use slow motion video all the time.
Okay.
Because it's on our
How do you
phones, it's just so easy to do.
yeah. How do you set that up? For example, I'm thinking of myself. Usually I'm the one that has to try and perform the movement or the exercise
Mhm,
or
mhm,
whatever with the dog. And then that makes it actually hard to evaluate at the
mhm,
same time, depending
mhm.
on what I'm looking at. But having the owner take a video is
Oh, yeah.
usually also just not doesn't work well. So
Yes.
how do you set that up so that you have a good, reliable video?
Yeah, well, you try to educate the owners, but you know as well as I do that no matter how many times you say, "Take the video at the level of the dog," they still are standing up, taking the video. Um, so it's much better if you can teach them that while they're face to face, to you, to explain, what you're looking for and why we do it that way. But as far as doing it in the room, I've got a tripod, and I've used that for a lot of things. I also bought one of those shoulder harnesses that you can hook your phone to, where it can be right here on your chest,
Okay.
so that when they're doing stuff in front of you, you can take videos of that. But most of the time, it's the tripod that I use. We're lucky at work that we have students and assistants and everything that can take videos while we walk the dog, because it's very important to have somebody that walks the dog that knows what
Mm,
they're doing also, in addition to taking the video. So
exactly. All right. Stephanie asks, do you find it valuable to review video taken by owners in real life, especially for sporting and working dogs?
yes, yes, very much so. But again, we have to stress it may take several times of them sending you a video, because we have
Mm,
to stress proper video form, proper how to take the video. So if they send you one and it's just always from the back, then typically you can't see anything. So we'll explain to them how to take it, what we're looking for. A lot of times it's because the dog is doing something specific that they mentioned to us, but we can't reproduce it in the clinic.
mhm,
So that's when we definitely will, because we had one dog, we tried everything. It was something that she did while she was swimming. We have a pool. We tried, she never would do it. And so we finally got to see it when the owner took a video of it, because we couldn't see it at the clinic.
yeah, those are very useful. Um, Also in work, right? In competition,
Mhm.
watching their events and how they're performing can be really valuable.
Oh, yeah, and relying on the owner, because that owner that's run 20 agility trials with their dog knows when the dog is hesitating, that
Mm,
I might not pick up on. So it's very important, until they give me a specific video.
mm,
It's very important to pay attention to the owners, because they do know their dogs. And as far as working dogs, I had one handler send me a video of his dog that was really ataxic in the hind limbs, and he's like, "What should I do?" And I'm like, "Bring him to the vet." So it's good to have people like that feel comfortable sending you things like that.
mm. I love that. Do you find that there are kind of specific transitions or movements or exercises that give you more information, that give you like the most information? What are your go-to things that you always feel this has given you something you're going to be able to work with and improve and evaluate? And yeah, does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Um, so walking, having them walk and having them trot and singing them from the front and the back and at least one side, is very important. And again, slow motion video, but trotting typically shows you typically see lameness more in a trot, because it's added force to impact force on their joints as they hit the ground at a higher speed,
Mm,
just simple physics. Um, so we do that a lot. We're lucky enough to have a force plate at work, but not everybody has that, uh, unfortunately. Standing, like I said, again, can they stand and place weight on all 4 feet? Can they
mm,
sit properly? um, when they stand from a sit, do they pull themselves up with their front feet, or they actually use their hind limbs? Do they use one hind limb more than the other when they stand up? Um,
Mm.
different things like that. Again, like I said, turning at the end or turning in circles.
So
Trying to
it's
think.
really those foundations of our assessment that give us the most information
Mhm.
reliably.
Yeah,
That's
and
why
stairs.
they're the foundation of our movement assessment. Yeah.
We use stairs a lot too, because if they're hopping going up the stairs, that means that they can extend their hip. And a lot of dogs don't want you to do hip extension, even in standing, much less laying down. So if they're hopping, we know that their hip flexors are tight, and
Mm.
that's usually secondary to some injury or weakness that they have.
Mm. Okay, I love that. How do the goals for the specific dog, for example, going into a specific sport or preventing injury, or an owner might have a specific goal, how does that shape what you're looking for in the assessment?
Um, well, it's really important to do each assessment based on that specific dog. So I'm going to have a different assessment for a pet dog than I would for a sporting dog or a working dog, just like we were talking about before with the bite dog versus a detection dog. Um, but um, if they just need to be able to go out to potty and be able to come back up the 5 stairs on their deck in the backyard, um, it's important to know what the owner's goals are. That is a huge part of the how I choose what activities to do in the assessment as well as in the program. What and that becomes even more important with a performance or working dog. What do they do? What cues do they use to sit? Like a field trial dog has a lot of different cues for different sits. They sit beside you, they sit way far away from you, they respond to a whistle. It's important to know what cues are required in each sport. And there's so many sports, it's impossible to know it all yourself because you can't go watch all of them. So you're really relying on the owner for this. And with my handlers, my canine handlers, I have to really pay attention to if what I'm asking them to do is going to confuse them in their working behaviors. So I don't want to reuse cues for something they use. I want to create a new cue. I don't want to use a toy on a police
Yeah.
canine because usually they go ape and they can't calm back down. They can't focus. So knowing the right reward when you're doing these evaluations is incredibly important.
Yeah. So I that just throws up so many questions for me. I don't generally work with athletes, canine athletes specifically.
Mhm.
That's outside of my sort of comfort area. And as you're saying all of this, I'm just like, there's so much scope for me to make a mistake or put my foot in it just because I don't know the specific requirements or the language that they're using, the owner and the
Oh,
dog, when
yeah.
they're speaking to each other, the cues that they've trained. So you've said you really rely heavily on the owner. Do you have them performing the majority of the exercises? Are you speaking to the owner and telling them this is what I want you to do, and then having them do that with the dog, or are you really doing it with the dog and hands on like you would be with a pet dog?
Um, typically, it can be a combination of both. It depends on the ability of the owner. Like, as
Mm.
most of my agility owners have got their dogs to do anything and everything, every kind of trick in the book. But then they're like my canine handlers, they don't do a whole lot of obedience. They don't do a whole lot of um, uh, teaching trick behaviors. And so it can be a little bit, and to them, they consider being able to target their front feet a trick behavior because they don't do anything other than run and catch bad guys. But so we really work hard on owner education. It just depends, like I said, on the level of the owner and the handler. Some of them can take right off and they know exactly what you're saying, and you just may have to step in and be like, wait, but see how when you put your hand here, it makes him offload this way or look up,
Mm.
extend their neck too much. There's just different tips. I love it when an owner comes in and I can ask them, can you have your dog pivot around this
Yes.
disc, and they're like, oh yeah, and then others, we just have to work and reward every step they take in that direction.
Yeah. You mentioned you have owners come in that they've taught their dog like every trick in the book. The initial thought is that's such an advantage, but is it really? Because my question, my kind of follow-up thought to that would be, if the dog is really keen to do all these things, how much more do they mask during, do they mask to complete the behavior that that the owner is asking for? Will they then push through pain because they know what the owner wants and they love it? It's so exciting to work and to do the tricks. They really do love it. So does that then become a disadvantage? And I think as well, if owners are not educated in exercise physiology, they could very easily take trick training to a point where they are doing damage to their dogs without intending to, and without knowing, because we're using the body in all these novel ways. So that would kind of be my question. Is it an advantage? Is it a disadvantage? Do you see a lot of owners who get really excited about all the things that they can do actually do harm in the long run?
Yeah, for one thing, they don't let their dogs rest. But for another thing, I mean, that's a big problem, and they want to return to sport way too quickly because their dog wants to do it. So yeah, it's definitely a good point. Like if they're excited to do an activity, so I try to teach them to not use the excited voice, maybe choose a different piece of equipment if that dog really keys on one piece of equipment versus another. Choose something else that's a little bit less stimulating to the dog. Take deep breaths. Keep your voice neutral, fairly low, not really high pitched, because that does get them more excited. And yes, they don't know proper form for a lot of this. So again, client education is key to be like, do you see how I had one owner of a whippet who's already, got arch in his back, and she put him on a piece of equipment that he couldn't stretch out on. He was like this. And she was like, oh, it was a piece of balance equipment. Oh, he's doing good. He's doing blah, blah. And I was like, yes, but we ideally want to see the back as straight as possible and not arched up like that. And she was like, oh, I never even thought of that. And she's a veterinarian and has multiple agility dogs. So there's definitely, you never know what you don't know. And the more I learn, the more I realize things that I've done wrong in the past. So it's very important that's another advantage where sending video in, they can send video in of them doing exercises at home. And you can say, well, do you see where your hand is in this video? That's going to help, if you lower your hand, it's going to help them do the behavior better with better form. All the people that are teaching their dogs sit pretty that shouldn't be doing sit pretty. It can be a challenge.
Okay. The nice thing is always that these owners are generally so keen to learn that it is actually most of the time, not always, but easy to teach them to recognize certain things. So I think that is, maybe it is more of an advantage than
I think it is more of an advantage because they are more into their dog. They have more of an investment in their dog. They have fun. Their dog has fun. And so they really want to keep the dog healthy. And so if you're telling them something, they usually pay attention more so than others. So
okay, I like that. Okay, and your working dogs, like the police dogs with the military dogs, how are they different? You mentioned that you mentioned a little bit about the handlers. Tell us a little bit more about how
they are so different. They're my favorite. I think everybody knows that knows me, but they're so different. Like I've worked with multiple, and every single one I work with, I have to go about getting them to do exercises differently. I had one dog that could not do exercises without his Kong in his mouth, or he would get too excited and try to bite. I tried using food because that's obviously what we want to use because it calms them down some. But for this dog, basically, it was a pacifier. His Kong was a pacifier. And the
Mm,
only time I could get him to let me use food was when we did like the posture downs and he had to lean forward with his and stretch his pelvis. And as long as he had his Kong right in front of him where he could see it and grab it if he needed it, he would take food from me. No other time. No other time. So the handler would use that toy, which normally would be too stimulating, as
mm,
he would take a step in the right direction of his pivot, he'd give him toy. And so it takes longer a lot of times to teach those dogs the behavior. But then I had another dog whose handler had been trained a lot in, because a lot of these handlers do dog training on the side. But
mm.
this handler had a lot of clicker training. And so that was great because I could work with him and be like, no, see if you can get him to do this. And he would just pick it up right away.
Oh,
Um,
lovely.
and then I have a dog that had back surgery that we were doing rehab on, and his ADHD was just, I mean, all over the place. He can't keep his focus very long, and so you have to break
Mhm.
it up. You have to make it quick. You have to make it exciting. You have to make it fun. Um, and then you have handlers that don't want to use food, or it's getting better. It's getting better. I'm actually starting to work consistently with some of the handlers of dogs that are not injured to try to
Okay.
help prevent some injury. But they require a lot of education because not all of them know dog training basics,
Mm. Okay.
unfortunately.
So a very different group of
Mhm,
people as
mhm,
well as
and group
dogs
of dogs.
working with.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, you
That,
can
that,
usually the motivation is usually there. It's just being able to channel it and slow them
yeah.
down a little bit is the challenge.
So okay, so the motivation for the dogs. What are the challenges with the owners, with the handlers? They're not the owners, right? The handlers are
It's
not.
usually owned by the department,
Okay.
but they can, if they retire, they usually have first choice to take them home. They consider themselves their owner, and I
Okay.
treat them as the owner because they're with them all the time. So I have to pay attention to what they're telling me about their dog, and it can be
So
something.
same approach and mindset. You're still thinking of them as that unit. Are they even more so of a unit than the normal owner dog that we think about because of their work?
Yes. So, like
Yeah.
the dog that I was talking about that had back surgery, I did step in and start using food with him and doing it myself because he's a very reliable dog. He's not going to bite me. He's very good natured, but he's so hyper and he'd had back surgery. So we were trying to keep him, as calm as possible. Um, without too many drugs because then you can't get them to do the exercises either. And so it's just really hard to get them, like I said, to slow down,
Mm.
think about where their feet are. That's another thing that a functional assessment can tell us. Do they actually know they have back feet? Do we need
Mm.
to work on body awareness?
Mm.
That has been a huge focus of the programs that I do now, and how I teach is body
Mm.
awareness and core strength is just at the very
Mm.
top of everything, I feel like, especially for these guys, the working dogs, because they just go through life 90 miles an hour.
But like racehorses,
Mhm.
they don't know where their bodies are. They just know
No,
forward.
no,
Let's
yeah.
talk a little bit more about hind limb awareness because I think that's really interesting, and
Mhm,
there's a lot we can actually unpack there. Um, but I also think that there's so much training component that comes into hind limb awareness that can make it really tricky for us to evaluate it.
mhm.
In my mind, I think I might have the wrong picture, but I'd love to have that picture from you. How do you evaluate hind limb awareness? Is it something that you can do with every dog, with a pet dog versus a dog that knows all the tricks? How do you look for that, and then what do you do about it if you find some lack of awareness?
Yeah. Um, there's so many different ways, and again, it's always the dog that's in front of you.
Mm,
One example I can think of is, a little French bulldog that I worked with, of course, had back issues, and she had had surgery, and it was in the lumbar area, and once she got stronger and we were able to push her a little more and ask her to do more than just basic exercises, I tried getting her to learn to pivot.
Mm.
And she was very willing. She loved treats. She wanted to do whatever I asked. And she could pivot to the right, but she could not pivot to the left. And it
Mm.
was very definitely a neurologic deficit. It wasn't that she didn't want to do the behavior. I mean, she was turning and practically falling over, but she could not lift that left hind limb. That's an extreme example, but as far as how do they walk across cavalettis? Do they hit every
Mm.
single one of them when they walk across, but they don't have any range of motion
Mm.
issues? They just are not paying attention. Um, and you can't assess that on one or two passes through. You have to let them do it multiple times to actually let them figure out what you're asking them to do. I think that's
Mm.
what so many people do wrong is too quickly. They're like, oh, they can't do this, when
Mm.
what they're doing may be confusing the dog and limiting them from being able to do that activity.
Okay.
So seeing cases like that over and over helps a lot because, like I said, I've seen a lot of cases, but knowing that it's not always physical that's causing them to not be able to do it. It may be mental. They don't understand it. The
Mhm.
owner doesn't understand it, various things like that.
I love that. So really pay attention to, does the dog understand what you're asking them to do?
Yes.
If
Yes.
they understand and they're motivated to do what you're asking them to do, are they unable to? Is that inability neurological? Is it physical? Is it because of a lack of range of motion in a specific joint?
Mhm.
Or is it because of weakness in a specific muscle? Or the Frenchie that you mentioned, is it a neurological deficit peripherally or centrally? Or okay, etc., etc. So
Mhm.
let's stay with our hind limb awareness and let's kind of stick with our Frenchie as an example. What are you going to do with that functional assessment? You've now identified that he's motivated, he wants to pivot in both directions, but he's physically incapable. What do you do with that information and taking it into your rehab plan? What are your next steps?
The first thing I can think of, like with the Frenchie, her mom was a vet, just not a rehab vet, but she was a vet, and I had her do a lot of neurologic stimulation of that
Mm.
one particular leg. We never got her to where she could pivot on the left hind leg. It was just not possible. But in order to increase awareness of that limb, I would have the owner do some stimulation of the paws, toe pinches, using a rag or a brush to brush that hind limb. But like I said, it's in some cases you're not going to be able to do that. Other cases, if it's not physical and they can learn that, then it becomes beneficial to teach them to back up one foot onto a really, really small step, like get them to turn and put one foot up or back up and put their foot. And again, that involves teaching hind limb targeting. So teaching hind limb targeting is an excellent way to create hind limb awareness.
Mm.
Um, and most dogs, once they learn the game of learning, then they figure it out. My Pitty will back up onto anything when she sees a treat and she figures out that's what I'm asking. It may take her a minute if we hadn't done it in a while, but as soon as she sees what I want, she'll stand on her head practically to get the treat. So,
Sweet. Is it quite difficult to teach hind limb targeting? I've never done it.
um, it wasn't with her, like I said, because she's so food motivated.
Yeah.
It's not hard for dogs, even dogs that like agility dogs or something that have never, like if it's a beginning owner or something, but they've
Mm.
taught their dogs other things. And so
Mm.
the dog understands that when mom gets that clicker out or that treat bag out, we're going to do a behavior. It's much easier for them to learn it because
Okay.
they understand operant conditioning and they understand, oh, she's getting me to do something. I've just got to figure out what it is. So that makes it easier. Some dogs, they're very difficult, like in different breeds, different, you've got I can think of several, but like I can think of a Pyrenees. They're, any kind of giant breed that's just like, nah, I just want to lay down.
Yeah.
And they don't really care about food. You have to get really creative. And sometimes you just have to admit defeat with some dogs.
Take
Um,
them for a walk.
yeah, take them for a walk. Yeah, exactly. But even that, they can walk up and down off of curbs. They can
Yeah.
walk over different types of substrate or textures of ground, walking in sand, different things that they can do. We use circuits at work a lot, with our different pieces of equipment, like our climbs or our Cato boards or our inflatable equipment, and create differences in the textures to get them to walk across. And that's a really good assessment of how comfortable they are with their back legs, and do they know that they belong directly behind them and not over here to the side or off over here. So that's a good way to do it, to see if they're comfortable on different textures and surfaces.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dawn. I love that. So guys, we're gonna start wrapping up now. I have a big announcement to make as soon as we're done. But Dawn, before we finish, I would love to know, where can people learn more from you? Where can they learn more about functional assessment, about canine exercise?
Definitely. Our website with VAL, Veterinary Academy of Higher Learning, is the company that manages our programs and markets it. And the website is UT Vet Rehab at, I'm thinking of emails, utvetrehab.com. It's really simple. And that takes you to all of our programs. It takes you to our certified equine rehabilitation practitioner, certified canine rehabilitation practitioner, and our certified canine fitness trainer. It takes you to all of those options on that page, utvetrehab.com. And you can pick which class you want to take, which location you want to take the live lab at. Most of the stuff is done online. So it's kind of self-study. You can do it at your own pace until you get to the live lab, and those days are obviously required. But we try to make it as easy as possible for people to have access to this, but also get plenty of opportunity at hands-on learning.
Okay, so it's very convenient because you can sign up to the course at any time, and then you opt in for whichever lab is easiest for you to attend.
Correct.
And then you do that. And you can
and all that's
change.
listed on the website.
Yeah, and you can change which labs you go to. So if
Yes.
something happens and you need to reschedule, you can push that off. Okay,
Yep.
yeah. That's really cool.
We try to make it easy, and it's a lot of fun. We really have a lot of fun in the classes. So
Okay, thank you for sharing that.
Mhm.
Okay, so the Vet Rehab Summit is our annual online conference. And it is our big opportunity in the year to come together live with each other. If you guys are following Online Pet Health, or you're a part of our community, you know that most of our webinars, most of our teaching is pre-recorded and then shared with you. And that is really because we want to make life as convenient and easy and accessible for you as possible. And that really is the best way to do it. But once a year, we all come together live and in person. We're still online, so you can still join us from anywhere in the world at the Vet Rehab Summit. And this year, Vol is our gold sponsor. And they align so well with our summit this year, because our theme, you guys are the first to find out. So if you're live with us today, you're the first to hear this. But our theme this year is dynamic by design. And we're really going to be going into exercise physiology, into making the most out of movement, because our bodies are created to move. Our dogs and our horses' bodies are created to move. And if we can just be effective with our exercises, sometimes that's all we need. That's all they need is good movement. So that is our theme for this year. We are partnering with Vol. They're our gold sponsors. Our program is actually set. Our lecturers have all agreed and are ready to go. So we'll be making all those announcements soon. I'm sure you can see how excited I am. I am beyond excited. I think this is going to be a phenomenal summit. We have incredible lecturers lined up. So keep your eyes open. It's on the 8th of November. Bookmark that in your calendars, guys. You want to be there live. We are going to be doing things differently. It is going to be more accessible, easier to attend than it has ever been before. But you need to book that day in your calendar. So the 8th of November. Okay. Thank you so much.
Very exciting.
Yeah, it's going to be so good. And thank you to Val for making this conversation possible, for putting us in touch with you, and for joining us this year. So thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Awesome. If you guys are watching this as a recording and you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the comments, and we'll come back in later and have a look. Yeah, and if you need any topics discussed, if you guys want us to cover anything, let us know and we can do that. Okay. Awesome. Have a great day, guys.
Bye, you too.
Bye.
Bye.